Good evening, Shavua Tov, good Voch. Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Let's light up the darkness as we start the week off with some beautiful Torah learning. Who's in the house? Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Melissa in Great Neck, Nancy, North Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Bella in Florida, Shandora in the Bronx, Frank in San Pedro. Welcome, everybody. Okay, the new summer hours are here. We didn't have class last week because I was traveling, right? But now that the clocks have changed, it's late on Saturday night. All summer long, I'm going to be in awe of all the people on the East Coast who are tuning in so late. And it gets late indeed. So I'm always going to try to keep it efficient on a Saturday night. Our daf today is page 84 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud. Tonight, with God's help, we're going to finish chapter 9 and open chapter 10. We've been talking about certain transgressions that do not bear a court-imposed death penalty. They tended to bear a charis, which is death at the hands of the heavenly court. But in some cases, there was zealotry, that sort of to defend God's honor, as it were. There were certain cases where God's honor, or the whole Jewish people were imperiled, but a death penalty wouldn't apply, either for a technicality or for other reasons. And so zealots would step in and take care of the situation, so to speak, or a court which couldn't condemn a person to one of the 4 death penalties mentioned in the Torah would instead lock a person up and under conditions where they were never going to get out of that lockup and they weren't going to last that long in it. These are very, very unusual circumstances. That case of zealotry, which was used as the model, is when Elazar, the grandson of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, Moses' brother, his grandson once stopped a plague when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, eating the manna, drinking water from the miraculous well of Miriam, under the clouds of glory, with a visible manifestation of God's presence in the pillar of cloud there every day. And under that circumstance, a bunch of Jewish men were straying and pursuing these non-Jewish women to go commit idolatry. And really, God did not like it. And this plague was coming. It ended up killing 24,000 people and would have done more. And even one of these tribal leaders named Zimri was fornicating with this Midianite princess Cosby, in view of Moses and the elders of Israel. I don't know what was going on there. And everyone was so shocked that Elazar picked up a spear and killed both of them. Now, we learned that, the limitations on when zealotry is allowed are many. I mean, it's almost never allowed. In that situation, it was allowed, and it wouldn't have been allowed if you arrived a minute later and, the fornicating had ended. He wasn't there to punish them. He was there to stop something that was an affront to God and a great danger to the Jewish people. Okay, and then we also saw that for certain kinds of offenses of priests serving while tameh, ritually impure, in the temple, which is a desecration of the temple service for the priests when the temple is standing, and it hasn't in 2,000 years, that some of the younger priests would take such a priest out and take care of him, right, on their own extrajudicial execution. Again, very limited instances. From there, we went to talk about from where is it derived that all manner of, priests serving while tameh or eating teruma while tameh and other related types of transgressions, that the penalty for them is charis, which is excision or death at the hands of the heavenly court. And how do we know that it's charis? From where is this derived in the Torah? That's a discussion we were having yesterday. And now we'll pick this up on 84a near the top. I will just mention now that tomorrow, Sunday, we have a special time. The class tomorrow is going to be at noon tomorrow. Nina and I are attending a funeral, sadly, and that will interfere with class at the regular time. And then Monday, there's going to be no class because I'm traveling to a special screening of our movie Guns N' Moses in Aspen, Colorado. It's a charity benefit for the charity Join Israel. We had a screening with that beautiful organization that helps at-risk youth and elderly people in the land of Israel. It's called Join Israel. We had a beautiful screening with them in New York City some months ago, and now they're doing one in Aspen, Colorado. So I'll be in Aspen. If you're in Aspen and you'd like to come to the screen, that'd be great. I think tickets are still available. That is Monday night. I'll fly back Tuesday morning, God willing, and then we'll be back to class at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday. Okay, that's the announcements. The Baraisa continues with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service. So what's a blemish? And the Torah tells us that a priest cannot serve if he has a blemish. That's some kind of a physical blemish on him. Then a priest cannot serve in the Holy Temple. There's other limitations too. They can't be below, I believe, 20 years of age. They can't be more than 50 years of age when they're serving as Kohanim in the Holy Temple, when standing in Jerusalem. But also a blemish. Here we're not getting into what are the definitions of the various blemishes that would, prohibit a priest from serving and performing the avoda, the service, right? The Kohanic service, the priestly service in the temple. Here we're just saying if he has such a blemish and he serves anyway, then what kind of punishment is it? Is he liable to charis, death at the hands of the heavenly court, or has he merely violated a prohibition? It's not permitted, but he's not going to be subject, he's not going to be liable to charis. Which is it? So with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service, Rebbe says he is punished with charis. And the rabbis say, no, it's only he's only liable for violating a prohibition. So the Gemara elaborates, what is the reason for the opinion of Rebbe? It is written, but he shall not come into the curtain, and he shall not approach the altar as he has a blemish, that he desecrate not my sacred places, from Leviticus 21:23. And Rebbe derives the punishment by means of a verbal analogy. The meaning of the term desecration, chilul, written with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service, is derived from the term chilul, desecration, written with regard to an impure priest who partakes of teruma, the food that is consecrated only to be eaten by priests, and both the priest and the teruma must be tahor, in a state of ritual purity. Just as there, with regard to teruma, he is punished with charis, so too here, with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service, he is punished with charis. And the Gemara challenges this, and let us derive the punishment by means of a different verbal analogy. Same charis, but maybe we should pull it from a different verse. Derive the meaning of the term chilul, written with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service, from the term chilul, written with regard to nosar, food, part of this meat of a sacrifice that had to be eaten within 2 days of when it was brought on the altar. This is the types of sacrifices that have edible portions, like a sin offering which priests eat, or a peace offering which the owner can eat. But it has to be eaten within a certain amount of time. And beyond that, it becomes prohibited, and then it's called nosar. So just as there, with regard to nosar, he is punished with charis, so too here, with regard to a blemished priest who performs the temple service, he is punished with charis. Same prohibition, same penalty, but derived from a different verse. So the Gemara explains it is reasonable to say that he should have derived the punishment for a blemished priest who performs the temple service from teruma, as the Tana of our Baraisa derives the bodily disqualification of a blemished priest from the bodily disqualification of an impure priest. A priest who's his body is in a state of impurity. He's tameh, and that's why he cannot eat the teruma. And likewise, a blemished priest, there's something up with his body. So these two things are more similar than nosar, which has to do with timing of the meat of a sacrifice. But the Gemara challenges this derivation and says, on the contrary, he should have derived the punishment for a blemished priest who performs a temple service from nosar, as there are elements common to nosar and a blemished priest who performs a temple service. Unlike teruma, both cases are involving sacrificial matters. A blemished priest is bringing sacrifices. Nosar has to do with sacrifices. And both involve matters that are performed inside the temple, whereas eating teruma can happen outside the temple. And in both cases, the disqualification of pigul and the disqualification of nosar are applicable. Rather, Rebbe derives the law of a blemished priest who performs a temple service from the law of an impure priest who performed the temple service due to the elements common to both. And he derives the bodily disqualification of a blemished priest from the bodily disqualification of an impure priest who performs a temple service. And he derives the case of a blemished priest whose case involves sacrificial matters performed inside the temple and the relevance of both pigul and nosar from the case of an impure priest, right? Impure, he became tameh. For example, he touched a dead body or walked over a grave. And the blemish, has some kind of a blemish on his body. Both have to do with the body of the priest who is going to be performing sacrificial matters when he shouldn't because of either the blemish or his tuma, his impurity. And the relevance of pigul and nosar. So the Gemara asks, and the rabbis, what is the reason that they hold that he is liable only for violating a prohibition, right? Rebbe said, kares, for a blemished priest who serves in the temple while he's blemished, but that was the minority opinion. The rabbis, the majority, say no, it's not kares. This would only be violation of a prohibition, but it's not kares. And why is that? It is, as the verse states, Leviticus 22:9, and die because of it. If they desecrate it, I am the Lord who sanctifies them. From which it is derived, because of it they receive death at the hand of heaven, but not in the case of a blemished priest. This is an exclusionary term. So the Baraisa continues with regard to one who intentionally performed an action of misuse. So we're moving on, right? The rabbis, the majority say, no, it's violating a prohibition, and that's what it is. So now we're going to go on to a different matter that is, again, prohibited, and there's going to be an argument, is it kares or just a prohibition? So with regard to one who intentionally performed an action of misuse of consecrated property, hekdesh. So something that was consecrated, a donation to the Holy Temple for its upkeep, or an animal that was set aside to be brought as a sacrifice when the temple is standing. And a person then used that consecrated item, which essentially belongs to God, for his own use. That's misappropriation of consecrated property. So what about that? What's the penalty for that? Rebbe says kares, and the rabbis say violated a prohibition. So the Gemara elaborates, what is the reason for the opinion of Rebbe? Rabbi Bahu says he derives a verbal analogy, the meaning of the term of sin. Sin, which word are we using for sin here? Chet, right? Chet. So same word like we use the chet ha'egel, the sin of the golden calf, is the kind of sin that we're talking about here, chet. Okay, so what about that? Where am I? Rabbi Bahu says he derives a verbal analogy from using the meaning of the term sin, written with regard to one who intentionally misuses consecrated property in Leviticus 5:15, and he derives that from the term of sin, written with regard to an impure priest who partakes of teruma, which we know as kares. So just as there with regard to teruma, the priest is punished with kares, so too here, one who intentionally misuses consecrated property is punished with kares. And the Gemara explains, and the rabbis say that the verse states with regard to teruma, because of it they receive death at the hand of heaven. This would be exclusionary, and you would not extend that law to something else like misuse of consecrated property. The Gemara cites a dispute between the sages with regard to the punishment of a non-priest, another now transgression, a non-priest, an impersonator who's not a priest, and he went into the holy temple and performed the service, presumably intentionally. He knew that he was a non-priest. And he performed the temple service. It is taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Yishmael says, it is stated here, you and your sons, you shall keep your priesthood in everything that pertains to the altar. And any non-priest who approaches shall be put to death. You must. Numbers 18:7, and it is stated there, anyone who approaches the tabernacle of the Lord shall die. Yamus. Yumas and yamus, very related words, right? Just different syntax of shall be executed. So just as there the references to kares, death at the hand of heaven, so too here in the case of a non-priest who performs a temple service, the reference is to kares. So Rabbi Akiva says that it is stated here, and any non-priest who approaches shall be put to death, you must, and it is stated there, and that prophet or that dreamer of a dream shall be put to death, you must. Same syntax. So just as there with regard to the prophet, he is executed by stoning, so too here a non-priest who performs a temple service is executed by stoning. Rabbi Akiva says, no, we're not downgrading the transgression and saying, no, it's not kares, it's only violating a prohibition. He's upgrading the prohibition, saying, no, it's not death at the hands of heaven, it's death at the hands of an earthly court. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, just as there with regard to the prophet, he is executed by strangulation, so too here, a non-priest who performs a temple service is executed by strangulation, generally thought to be the most lenient form of the court-ordered death penalties, but a court-ordered death penalty nonetheless. We're going to be talking in just a few minutes in chapter 10 about general laws of strangulation, like the last of the court-ordered death penalties that we're spending a chapter with. Now the Gemara asks, with regard to what principle do Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva disagree? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva holds that it holds. In the verbal analogy, one derives yumas from yumas, and one does not derive yumas from yamus. And Rabbi Yishmael holds, although the terms are not identical, one derives by means of a verbal analogy the law of an ordinary person from the law of an ordinary person. And one does not derive the law of an ordinary person from the law of a prophet. And the Gemara asks, and what does Rabbi Akiva hold? Once the prophet incited others to idol worship, you have no greater example of an ordinary person than that, as he is no longer a prophet. He does not have the status of a prophet. If a one-time prophet incites others to idolatry, we don't consider him a prophet anymore. And the Gemara asks, with regard to what principle do Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri disagree? And the Gemara answers, they disagree with regard to this issue that is the subject of the dispute of Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. As it is taught in a baraisa, a prophet who incited others to idol worship is executed by stoning. And Rabbi Shimon says he's executed by strangulation. And the Gemara asks, didn't we learn in a Mishna with regard to a prophet who incites others to idol worship that Rabbi Akiva says he's executed by strangulation? Contrary to Rabbi Akiva's opinion cited in this baraisa. And the Gemara answers, these are two Tanaim, sages of the Mishnaic period, and they disagree with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Mishna, which cites the opinion that Rabbi Akiva holds that a prophet who incited others to idol worship is executed by strangulation, is citing the opinion of Rabbi Shimon in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon was his preeminent disciple. That baraisa, which cites the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, holds that a prophet who incited others to idol worship is executed by stoning. This is citing the opinion of the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon, and they too hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. It's funny, we had a good friend of mine who is a law professor with us for Shabbos, and we were talking about how the Talmud or law school or the study of philosophy, for that matter, sharpens the mind by clarifying the logic and the distinctions in an argument. Here's a perfect example, right? And this happens all the time in the real world. You have two people who are coming out with diametrically opposite positions, and they are both citing the same source. How is that possible? Either they're looking into that source and holding, their position based on one element of what that original source said, or there was a mistake or an error in the chain of transmission somewhere. But you'll very often have people coming out with opposite positions who are claiming to be speaking in the name of the same source, and then we would have to do a deeper dive to understand exactly what happened. In this case, however, we have completed chapter 9. Now we move on to chapter 10, and this is a short chapter as we are finishing now we're on 84b, and when we get to page 90, right, in 6 pages, then we're going to start one of the most exciting chapters in the entire Talmud Bavli, called Perek Chelek, or chapter 11 here in Tractate Sanhedrin, when we're going to be talking about who has a share in the world to come. And I've studied a bunch of times, and so I'm familiar that starts on page 90, so I'm kind of excited that we're getting close, and that also tells us that chapter 10 is a short chapter. Okay, chapter 10, Mishna number 1, top of page 84b. These are the transgressors who are strangled in the implementation of the court-ordered death penalty, right? And that's what we've been talking about here in Sanhedrin, which are the court-ordered death penalties: stoning, decapitation, burning, and strangulation. Chapter 9 was about burning. Chapter 10 is about strangulation, and this short chapter will complete our discussion of the laws of the death penalty in Torah law according to a based in a rabbinic court, or actually since more than a rabbinic court, a Sanhedrin, minimum a lesser Sanhedrin of 23 judges, as we learned at the beginning of Tractate Sanhedrin. All right. These are the transgressors who are strangled in the implementation of the court-imposed death penalty. One who strikes his father or his mother. Doesn't mean you killed your father or your mother, but if you hit your father or your mother, and we're not talking about cases where you're defending yourself from abuse, but if in anger you strike your father or your mother, that is a death penalty offense. Of course, the warning and the witnesses and all that would be necessary, and it probably, has rarely, if ever, been applied in history. But you should know how serious it is, the commandment to honor our parents, and this would be the flip side. And if you strike them, that's a death penalty offense. Number 2, one who abducts a Jewish person, right? So this is kidnapping. And when we talk about the 10 commandments, where it says thou shalt not steal, what it means is thou shalt not steal a person, because that is a death penalty offense, whereas stealing, thievery, is not a death penalty offense. But that's what's meant in the 10 commandments. Number 3, a rebellious elder, according to the court, and we'll get to what that means later, a false prophet, and one who prophesies in the name of idolatry, and one who engages in intercourse with a married woman, adultery, and conspiring witnesses who testify that the daughter of a priest committed adultery, even though, were she guilty, she would be executed by stoning. But these conspiring witnesses who tried to lie and subject her to that penalty, if they are found guilty of that crime, it's death penalty for them, but it would be strangulation rather than burning, and we'll get to why. And her paramour is also executed via strangulation, as in any case where a man engages in intercourse with a married woman. So the guy, the one who commits adultery with her, he is also subject to strangulation. That's Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 10. Now the Gemara, one who strikes his father or his mother is executed by strangulation. And Gemara asks, from where do we derive this law? And the Gemara answers, it is derived from a verse, as it is written, one who strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Exodus 21:15. The law isn't always so clear. That one is pretty clear. And so then the question is, how do we know that the penalty is strangulation? Clearly it's a death penalty offense. Could not be clearer. But why strangulation? Says the Gemara, and every death stated in the Torah without specification is referring to nothing other than strangulation, right? The default death penalty is strangulation when we don't have a reason to ascribe stoning, decapitation, or burning. So the Gemara suggests, say that one is not executed for striking his father or mother unless he kills him or her. Right? Maybe what they mean by striking your father or mother that results in a death penalty is that you killed your mother or your father. And what's wrong with that? Well, right away we'd say, well, if you kill your mother or your father and you've killed another person, you're going to be subject to a death penalty for that anyway. And murder is decapitation. So why would we say, and we know that strangulation is more lenient than decapitation. So if you killed your mother or father, who are protected by the extra prohibition of don't strike your mother or your father and honor your parents, and then you kill them, why would you have a more lenient death penalty than if you murdered someone else? Makes no sense. Must not mean that you get strangulation for striking your parents only if that blow leads to their death. Right? Say that one is not executed for striking his father's mother unless he kills him. And the Gemara explains, does it enter your mind to say that if one kills some other person, he is executed by beheading with a sword? But if he kills his father or mother, he is executed by mere strangulation? That is not reasonable. So the Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who said that strangulation is more lenient, a more lenient form than decapitation, because the corpse is not desecrated, right? The body is whole when you're strangled by a scarf that's pulled from two ends. Decapitation, not. That's why we say that strangulation is more lenient than decapitation. But we've seen an opinion which holds that decapitation is more lenient than strangulation. Minority opinion, we don't hold by it, but according to that opinion, according to the one who said that strangulation is a more severe form of execution than decapitation, then what is there to say? Perhaps one is liable to receive the death penalty for striking his father or mother only if he kills the parent, and the added severity for killing a parent is in terms of the specific form of death penalty. So the Gemara answers, rather, prove that one is executed by strangulation for striking his father or mother, even if he does not kill them, from the fact that it is written, one who strikes a man and he dies shall be put to death. Exodus 21:12. And it is written, or if in enmity he struck him with his hand and he died, he shall be put to death. In Numbers 35:21. Learn from these verses in which it states, strikes and he dies, that anywhere that there is mention of striking without specifying a resultant death, it is not referring to a case where the blow caused one's death. Since the Torah has been specific about instances where it's talking about striking leading to death by saying that, so then when it says striking and doesn't mention death, then the penalty and the prohibition refer to striking only. And in what case do we have that? Striking one's parent, mother or father. Now the Gemara notes, and it was necessary for the Torah to write one who strikes a man, and it was necessary for the Torah to write anyone who kills a soul. The murderer shall be slain on the basis of witnesses. Numbers 35:30. Since if the merciful one wrote only one who strikes a man and he dies, I would say that one who strikes a man, i.e. an adult, who is obligated in the fulfillment of mitzvahs, yes, he is executed. But one who kills a minor, no, he is not executed. You might have thought that. Therefore, the merciful one writes anyone who kills a soul. And if the merciful one wrote only anyone who kills a soul, I would say that one is executed even if he killed a non-viable newborn, or even if he killed a child born after a gestation period of 8 months, who in Talmudic times was also considered non-viable. Consequently, both verses are necessary. And this is to tell you, anyone who commits murder is liable to be executed, whether he kills an adult or a minor, a male or a female. A non-viable newborn, no, that's not considered murder. The Gemara asks, but if that is the source for the law, that one is liable for striking his mother or father, right, and that's a death penalty offense just for striking them even if they don't die, why not say that he is liable even though he did not wound him or her and draw blood? Why then did we learn in the Mishna 85b, one who strikes his father and his mother is not liable unless he wounds them? Okay, so it's a death penalty offense if you strike your mother or your father. But if you're just kidding around with your dad, you say, hey, good joke, Dad, and you just give him a little punch on the on the shoulder, kind of a friendly sort of buddy gesture, which you shouldn't do with your father. But if you did that, would you be liable for this transgression? No. It's only if you cause a wound. How do we know that? The Gemara answers that the verse states, and one who strikes an animal shall pay for it, and one who strikes a person shall be put to death. Leviticus 24:21. Juxtaposing one who strikes an individual with one who strikes an animal. And an earlier verse states, one who strikes the soul of an animal shall pay for it. Leviticus 24:18. So based on the combination of these verses, it is derived that just as one who strikes an animal is not liable unless he wounds it and draws blood, as soul is written concerning it, and it can be derived from the verse, for the blood is the soul, in Deuteronomy 12:23, that the term soul is a reference to blood. So too, one who strikes a person is not liable unless he causes a wound and draws blood. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah objects. He's saying, well, there were a lot of steps in that proof. Are you sure every step was solid? If that is so, then in a case where one weakened the animal by placing a burden of stones upon it and thereby injured it or killed it, would one say that so too in that case he is not liable because he did not draw blood? Clearly he is liable to pay for the damage that he caused to the animal. So rather, with regard to the term soul in the verse, one who strikes the soul of an animal, if it is not a matter that is relevant to the soul of an animal, as even in a case where one weakens the animal by placing a burden of stones upon it, he is liable if he injures the animal, so then apply it to the matter of the soul of a person, and thereby derive that one who strikes his parent is liable to be executed only if he wounds his parent and draws blood. Same outcome, same law, derived a little bit differently. The Gemara asks, but if the fact that one who strikes his parent is liable only if he draws blood is derived based on the principle, if it is not a matter, why do I need the juxtaposition between the striking of a man and the striking of an animal? And the Gemara answers, the juxtaposition is necessary in order to derive the law for that which is derived in a barais in the school of Chizkiah. Just as in the case of one who strikes an animal, there is no distinction between one who does so unwittingly and one who does so intentionally. And in both cases, he is liable to pay damages. So too in the case of one who strikes a person, there is no distinction between one who does so intentionally and is executed, and one who does so unwittingly and is not executed. In both cases, he is exempt from paying damages based on the principle that one receives only the greater punishment. If you're liable to be executed for killing a person, you don't pay damages for killing that person. And if you are liable to pay damages, it's because you're not liable to be executed. Now the Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who holds in accordance with the opinion of the Tan of the school of Chizkiah. But according to the one who does not hold in accordance with the opinion of the Tan of the school of Chizkiah, why do I need the juxtaposition between the striking of a man and the striking of an animal? What are we learning from that? And the Gemara answers, he derives that just as one who strikes an animal for medical purposes is exempt from payment of restitution, so too one who strikes a person for medical purposes is exempt, even if it results in the death of one that he treated. What are we talking about here? Bloodletting. What is bloodletting? For 2,000 years, the most common medical procedure there was letting blood, right? They would, a doctor would come and you just pierce your vein and then drain you of a certain amount of blood, half a pint. And this was based on a theory that doctors had for thousands of years, that the human body is composed of various fluids, also known as humors, and that they needed to be balanced. And the one that it was possible to balance was the blood. The other ones you couldn't control. But sometimes people would have too much blood, so to speak. And if you drain them of the blood, that would be a medically restorative procedure. Modern science has said there's only one condition now where a person genuinely generates too many red blood cells. for which we would use this treatment. We don't use it for anything else. It probably did have the effect, just like when you give blood, you're tired. And so having let blood, you would rest. And rest is very good for a body, right? Rest helps a lot of people get over lots of things. But at any rate, when this was a standard medical procedure, so what is the bloodletter or the doctor doing? He is wounding another human being and causing them to bleed. So are we going to say that he is liable for causing a wound and drawing blood? Obviously, that outcome makes no sense if that's considered a restorative and helpful medical procedure. So that gets covered here, and they're saying, okay, that's a different situation. You're not striking in anger, and you're striking for a constructive purpose of healing. That's why you're doing it. So the Gemara explains, a dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the law with regard to whether a son may let blood for his father? Okay, so generally a doctor has a permission to heal. That was not necessarily a given, right? If God is the life giver and the life taker, so then if a person is ill and they're going to die, except that a doctor can step in and cure, and then the person won't die, is that doctor playing God? Was that permitted? And our sages debate that elsewhere in the Talmud, and they come to the conclusion that, well, the science of healing is something that God gave, God allowed, God led the humans to the place where they developed technologies that could heal others. And so, yes, a doctor is permitted to heal people. You've heard there's lots of Jewish doctors, and they are permitted to heal. And once they have the ability to heal, they are obligated to heal. Right? Quite interesting. Not only permitted to heal, but obligated to heal if it is in their power. Of course, there are certain limitations. That's beyond the scope of today's class. But okay, now we're going, ancient world, bloodletting, very important medical procedure, which is meant to help a person. But we also have just been reading that if a person strikes his father or his mother and draws blood, that's a death penalty offense. So are we going to say that, well, maybe it's permitted and even obligated for doctors to heal where they can in order to save life, and bloodletting was considered something that would heal and maybe even save life in the ancient world. But can a son draw blood from his father? Maybe they should find somebody else to do the procedure, since we don't want a son causing a wound and drawing blood from his father. That's the dilemma. Is he liable for wounding his father? And Rav Matana says that it is written, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18. Just as one would want others to heal him when the need arises, one must heal others when the need arises. It is prohibited for one to do so to others, only those actions that he would not want done to him. Therefore, it is permitted for one to heal his father, even if the procedure entails wounding him. Rav Dimi Bar Chinana says this is derived from the juxtaposition between one who strikes a person and one who strikes an animal. Just as one who strikes an animal for medical purposes is exempt from paying restitution, so too one who strikes a person for medical purposes is exempt from liability. And by the way, once it's permitted to heal and even obligated to heal, then comes the question, what if it was the bloodletting or other procedure was intended to heal, but ended up hurting? What if the doctor either made a mistake or he did everything right, but the person's constitution was different, and this procedure that might have helped someone else killed this guy? So is the doctor liable? We said he's permitted to heal, but what if the procedure that he was permitted to do ended up hurting or even killing the patient? Obviously, that can happen. So according to law, the Talmudic law, halachic law, Torah law, generally, the doctor, if he didn't commit negligence, is exempt. He's exempt. He is not liable to pay damages. He's not liable to any criminal procedure. in the absence of negligence. Because he's permitted to heal, and we want him to heal, and we certainly, as a policy matter, don't want him to be so scared to heal that he won't do it because he's afraid that if it doesn't go well, he'll be found liable. So it makes sense that we would find him exempt. Okay, so we're back to the question, well, what about his son and his father? So the Gemara relates, Rav did not allow his son to extract a thorn from him due to the concern that his son would unwittingly wound him. So Mar, the son of Ravina, did not allow his son to pierce his blister, lest he wound him, which would be an unwitting violation of a prohibition. Again, we've seen the son is permitted to heal his father, but if it's not really medically necessary, if he could just be uncomfortable for a while longer and then let somebody else help him with the thorn, better than the son should wittingly or unwittingly unwittingly, that's not what he's trying to do, draw blood from the father. And the Gemara challenges this. If so, this should be a concern when another who is not his son treats him as well, as it is prohibited for one Jew to injure another. And the Gemara explains there is a distinction, as when another treats him, the concern is that the individual would be an unwitting violation of a prohibition. By contrast, when his son treats him, the concern is that he would be an unwitting violation of a prohibition that is punishable by strangulation. Right? If you strike another person and you don't kill him, so you did something that was prohibited, but it's not a prohibition that's subject to the death penalty. If you strike your father or your mother and draw blood, you've not only violated a prohibition, you have violated a prohibition that would render you liable to the death penalty, as we learned from the beginning of this sugya. Now the Gemara asks, but with regard to that which we learned in the Mishna on tractate Shabbos 122b, it is permitted on Shabbos to move an ordinary hand needle used for sewing garments to extract a thorn with it. So why is it permitted to extract a thorn on Shabbos? Let us be concerned lest he wound the individual in the process, which would be an unwitting violation of a prohibition punishable by stoning. Stoning because you desecrated Shabbos. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in. The Gemara answers there. Even if one wounds the individual, he is unwittingly performing a labor for destructive purpose, i.e. he is causing an injury, and one is liable to be executed for desecrating Shabbos only if the performance of a labor was for a constructive purpose. Right? What are the 39 categories of labor which are prohibited on Shabbos? We've been reading about them in the Torah portion this week and this past week and the week before. The construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the 39 kinds of labor that were necessary to construct the tabernacle in the wilderness, those are the categories of labor that are prohibited on Shabbos. Constructive labor. Causing an injury, that's not constructive, that's destructive. Unless you're causing the injury for a constructive purpose, like bloodletting, which would be prohibited on Shabbos, unless it were a life-saving procedure, in which case it would be permitted. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who said that one who performs a labor on Shabbos for a destructive purpose is exempt from punishment because that's not one of the prohibited labors of Shabbos. But according to the one who said it's prohibited, but he's exempt from punishment. But according to the one who said that even when performing the labor for a destructive purpose, there are cases where one is liable if he benefits from the action, right? When you are going to do a house building project and you have to demo existing walls, that's destruction for a constructive purpose. Tear it down so you can build up again in that same place. That would certainly be prohibited on Shabbos. So according to this, where some destructive purposes are also prohibited on Shabbos to the point that it's desecration of Shabbos and death penalty events, then what is there to say? And the Gemara answers, whom did you hear say that one who is destructive in causing a wound is liable to be executed if there is a constructive element to his action? It is Rabbi Shimon. And doesn't Rabbi Shimon say, with regard to one who performs any prohibited labor that is not necessary for its own sake, it is labor for which he is exempt, right? If you're doing something that's destructive, but not for the purpose, like in other words, the classic case about Shabbos, right? You can't pick up a hammer because it's muktzah, right? And that's an object that we just don't touch on Shabbos. But if you need its place because it's lying on your dining table and you want to have Shabbos lunch, okay, so then you can move it. you should move it you pick it up in a non-standard manner. But you're not moving that hammer for the sake of performing some labor with the hammer. You're moving it not for its own sake. You need the spot, right? So if you're doing labor that's not for its own sake, then you will not have been found to be desecrating Shabbos. And therefore, we just trace back what we were talking about here, right, we're arguing about the unwitting violation of a prohibition, that if you're drawing a thorn from another person and you draw some blood, obviously you weren't trying to draw blood, you were trying to remove the thorn, but since it wasn't for the purpose of drawing blood, why did these sages, who were just extra pious and strict, say to their sons, don't take the thorn out, even though you're just helping me and healing me, because you're going to cause a wound to your father? They're going beyond the letter of the law. That wasn't really necessary. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. We'll take some questions or comments. On Daf 84, just one question from Joseph. Hippocrates, the ancient Greek doctor who first formulated the medicine of bloodletting in the Western world and is quoted for the Hippocratic Oath, was an inspiration for the early theories on depression and anxiety as well. And these psychological ailments were seen as related to blood disorders in early psychiatry. Interesting. So this idea of the imbalance of the humors was not just that it could cause you physical illnesses, but emotional and psychological, intellectual illnesses as well. Thank you for that. That's what I've got for us today. Tomorrow, special time on Sunday, noon Pacific. Then no class on Monday and back to regular time on Tuesday. Have a great night.